This is Surat, Gujarat, a sprawling, modern city defined by flyovers and heavy traffic. But behind the main roads of one residential society, a series of events began that would eventually force every resident to abandon their homes. To understand the pattern, we have to look at the neighborhood's physical grid. This blueprint shows Street 1, Street 2, and the merging lanes that connected them. Vishnu's family lived right next to his cousin Arti, directly across from a Marathi family. During the peak of summer, these families would sleep on their flat roofs to find relief from the heat. The first reported incident happened here. A young man named Mithan woke up unable to breathe, describing a heavy weight pressing down on his chest and hands tightening around his throat. Exactly 3 days later, the phenomenon appeared at the house next door. Arti's daughters woke up in the dark, struggling against the same sensation of being strangled by invisible hands. Within weeks, it moved across the street to the Marathi family's roof. Their daughters reported being touched and choked before they saw a physical figure and fled downstairs in a panic. The families initially dismissed these as nightmares caused by the heat. However, once mapped out, a geographical pattern becomes clear. Every single attack began on the elevated roofs, before the activity finally moved down to the verandas and ground floor doors. Once the rooftops were abandoned, the activity followed the residents inside. We can see this transition by looking at a cross-section of Vishnu's ground floor veranda, specifically this latticed iron gate. One night, Vishnu heard this gate open. When he went to shut it, he found it was being held from the other side. He had to use all his strength to force it closed against something pulling back with equal weight. Physical sightings soon replaced the invisible forces. Vishnu's sister walked out of the bathroom late at night and saw a man suspended in the upper corner of the wall, clinging to the surface like a spider as he stared down at her. In the house next door, a neighbor named Rani walked into her kitchen and found a woman in a red sari standing by the counter. Her veil was down and she remained perfectly still, facing the wall. The entity then targeted a 5-year-old boy named Golu. While he was outside, he heard his mother calling him, but when he turned, he saw the woman in the red sari. She had no eyes and was smiling, trying to convince him to go with her. The haunting had transitioned from nighttime disturbances to active, visible hunting within the living spaces. After Golu's mental state began to deteriorate from the encounter, the residents realized they needed to bring in outside help. The society reached out to a relative who was training under a high-level spiritual expert named Ravikant. This map shows the 40-kilometer distance between the society and Ravikant's base in the town of Kim. The entity appeared to manifest 40 kilometers away before Ravikant could even reach Surat. In a Kim hotel, Vishnu's relative was approached by a woman claiming Ravikant sent her. When he checked the hotel hallway, he saw her standing there perfectly still, with both of her legs twisted backward. Ravikant never made it to the society. On his way to Surat the next morning, he was killed in a sudden traffic accident. With no spiritual protection left, the entity turned its attention to a resident named Saroj. While walking home down the lane at 2:30 in the morning, the woman in the red sari appeared and began walking right beside her. Saroj collapsed at her doorstep and was hospitalized, but the change was permanent. She stopped speaking to her family, eventually telling them she now belonged to the woman. Her health declined rapidly until she died shortly after. This presence had manifested miles away to intercept an exorcist and then claimed the life of a resident in the street. The residents were no longer dealing with a simple haunting. They were living in a space that had been entirely claimed by an outside force. Years later, Vishnu joined the Indian Army, but he couldn't leave the mystery behind. He returned to investigate the neighborhood's history with a former priest who had lived on that land for 30 years. The priest revealed that long before the modern houses were built, the land was a mixed community zone. During the 2002 Gujarat riots, this exact block became the site of extreme violence. One specific crime happened at this ground zero. A newlywed couple had moved in just before the riots. The husband was killed, and the young wife was raped and burned alive on the very soil where these houses now stand. A second spiritual expert later attempted to perform a cleansing ritual on the site. However, as the ritual began, he was suddenly drawn toward the road, where he was struck and killed by a truck. The woman in the red sari matches the bride lost to the fire, and the variety of other entities reported by the neighbors aligns with the many others who died in these streets. These were the collective voices of a massacre, tethered to the geography where they were killed. We think of our homes as safe havens built on blank slates, but geography carries a memory. Some atrocities leave a stain so deep that no ritual can clear it. If the land holds a secret this dark, the only way to survive is to leave the grid behind and never look back.